Hello and welcome to another session on methodology of literature. We continue with new criticism, and today we shall look at few features of new criticism, and then we shall move on to the various new critics and their concepts. So the first thing we did discuss in the introduction, we did discuss how it came into evolution, the new criticism. It was greatly influenced by the works of or the concepts of Matthew Arnold, the Victorian critic, and then you have T.S. Eliot, who played a pivotal role, or who can be considered as the pioneer of new criticism, and you have I.A. Richards, who began with practical criticism in United Kingdom. So you have new criticism and practical criticism, or otherwise called the modernist criticism. Both are the same. They had the similar feature. So the features of new criticism, or the new critics, focused mostly on words. They focused only on words. Words were everything to them, nothing external, and they stressed on close reading. Now we do not seek to understand the poet's personality through the poem, nor do we try to gain the insight into the socio-political history of the period in which the poet wrote the work. So rather, they focus only on the text. They focus on the structures, its form, how images are created, the choice of words, various figures of speech. All these were the ones that the new critics were concerned about. Nothing external to the text, nothing outside the text. Everything, according to them, it is autotelic. Now I shall be explaining what autotelic texts are. Autotelic is nothing but a text which has everything in it. It is all inclusive of everything, nothing outside the text. Now they consider text as an autotelic artifact, a complete thing, and it is independent. It has no connection with its author, nor the history or his intention, the author's intention. It is not dependent on the author at all, nor is it dependent on any of the historical contexts. Now I would like you to turn to page 41 of your textbook, where you have and I would like you to come to the first paragraph in page 41. Now Raman Selden speaks of 3 reasons as to why they became popular. That is there in your text in the first paragraph, not the first paragraph, the second paragraph in page 41. One reason was that the southern agrarians, or the fugitives as you call it, of the Vanderbilt University, they critiqued the industrialization and materialism of the Northerners. Second reason was that they imitated Matthew Arnold, and tried to present harmony, unity, and transcendence in literature during a war-wrought period, that is the Second World War and its subsequent Cold War period. The third reason for its popularity was that poems are meant for all. It is not for a particular gender or class or nation, and therefore they were to be presented to an international audience, and hence shorter poems were much preferred, and especially the one that was more democratic in nature, that did not have anything to do with the common history. So for the new critics, what was important? The text was important. They urged the readers to focus their attention on the text, on the literary text, and nothing else. The life and times of the author, a biography, the external events, the socio-cultural context, all these were out. They were completely excluded by the new critics. I stress this just for you to understand it so that you will not forget. It's similar to the formalists. Okay, and now let us take a look at some of the important concepts of the new critics. And we shall first start with, I'm not going based on the order of your text, I'm taking it here and there. I'm just telling you about the concepts mentioned in your textbook. So once you have understood the concept, you can just read your text, you will understand, because whatever, it is nothing to do with outside the text. Whatever is being spoken in this video has a lot, or is in connection to your textbook. Okay, so it is there in your text, whatever I am speaking here, but I'm not going as per the order in the textbook, that's all. So anyway, if you come to page number 41, I have explained what new criticism is. Some of you did ask me, we find it difficult to understand when we open the text. We feel that the video and the text does not match. No, that's because you are not reading the text properly. That's the only reason. So if you read the text well, you will understand. Now, so for those people, page 41, I'm speaking the concept. I'll start, the first concept that I would start is with the intentional fallacy and affective fallacy. Intentional fallacy and affective fallacy are two concepts given to us by two important new critics, Wimsatt and Beardsley. And their concepts of intentional fallacy and affected fallacy were pointed out in their book Verbal Icon. Okay, so let's look at what intentional fallacy is first. Okay, so what is intentional fallacy? It's there on page 41, fourth paragraph. So intentional fallacy is a type of, what is fallacy? Fallacy is error, mistake in judging certain things. So fallacy is an error, and intentional fallacy. So what is intentional fallacy? Intentional fallacy is a kind of mistake that you make in trying to figure out the intention of the author. You're trying by reading a text, or by reading the author and his biography and his socio-historical context in which he has written, you are trying to focus your attention what the author might have tried to assert, or the author might have intended. Not just the socio-historical or biographical features, you not really judge him by that, you also judge him by the words that he uses. For instance, if I am to say, if I am to write a poem about the color black, okay, and you may have a feeling that the author or I had intended to speak about the melancholy of life. Maybe it is because I had written it during the pandemic, the COVID-19, that you intend to think that I have written this poem basing it on death, the terrible death that this pandemic had raged. So what if I had not meant about it at all? What if I was speaking about the color black as such? Or what if I was speaking about my fish, the Blackmore? I'm speaking about my fish, my pet fish, and I wanted to write a poem about it. So you cannot be at all in any way be able to understand the intention of the author unless and until he tells you that you had intended, or he had intended to write, or he intended to speak about that particular topic. Otherwise you will not be able to understand it. See, so what happened was, I intended to write a poem. My poem on black was about my pet fish Blackmore, and you, or my dog, it is black in color and I am fond of it. So you intend to think that I had written this poem basing it, or thinking, or basing it with the pandemic right now. So see the variation in your judgment, see how you misinterpret the text. So this is a concept that Wimsatt and Beardsley tried to tell the authors, warn the audience or the readers that if you are to try to figure out what the intention of the author is, you're going to end up in having a wrong judgment. There is a fallacy that's called that's an error, and it is called intentional fallacy. So fallacy, intentional fallacy, is a type or a kind of mistake that people make by deriving meaning of the text according to the author's intention from his biography and his situation. It is an error in interpreting it according to the evidence as per the intention of the author. We do not know what he intended when he wrote those lines. So if we are to say this is what the author intends through this work, we cannot in any possible way understand the intention of the author, because we are not present at the time when he or she is writing it, or he or she has not told you that he is intending to write or his poem was intended on this particular thing. For another example would be blue curtain. So one is the color black. Another example would be blue curtain. By the use, that's one thing that is mostly or commonly a very good example, because see, by the use of the word blue, the author might have not intended to write anything about sadness or melancholy. But when you read the poem about blue curtain, you intend to, or you think that the author may have said, or author may have intended to speak about the melancholy that has spread around him. The room refers to the author's or the writer's mind, and the curtain blue refers to the melancholy that has surrounded him. So what if the author never intended that? What if the author just intended blue curtain as of the new blue curtain that he has put in his room? What if it is not a very deep poem? So here again, it's difficult to judge a poet's intention. Another thing is, see, if you are to speak about Shakespeare, has written about Romeo and Juliet. When he wrote Romeo and Juliet, or Othello, or Macbeth, you cannot. Shakespeare may have written all this with an intention, with a different intention, which in the 21st century is very difficult for us to understand. We cannot say that okay, Shakespeare meant this, because we cannot in any way, it is not humanly possible for us to meet him or try to figure out what he had intended. So intentional fallacy means an error or a mistake in trying to figure out what the intention of the author is. Okay, so the critics, the new critics, is totally against it, or especially Wimsatt and Beardsley. According to them, it leads to subjective interpretation. What you need is an objective interpretation. You cannot go in for a subjective interpretation. They believed that the meaning, the structure and the value of the text are all included within the text itself. You don't have to look at what Shakespeare may have intended or what the poet may have intended. You don't have to look at his biography or his details or the time in which he has written the particular poem. You just have to look at the poem alone, the structure or the language that the poet has used in the poem, the metaphors that he or she has used, the images used, the form in which he has presented the poem. That's all that you need and nothing more than that. Okay, so that is intentional fallacy. The text being autotelic and nothing beyond is required. So in the last video also we discussed something of that or similar to it. We spoke about Arnold speaking about objectivity. We also studied T.S. Eliot and the impersonality of the author. We did not study impersonality, of course. We did speak about impersonality of the author. So all this had a great impact on the new critics. So what is intentional fallacy? An error in trying to figure out or judge the poet's work based on the intention of the poet. We have completed intentional fallacy. Let's move on to the next concept given to us again by Wimsatt and Beardsley. That is affective fallacy. Let's just see opposite of intentional fallacy. If intentional fallacy is an error or a mistaken interpretation or a judgment, an error in judging the poem based on the poet's intention, affective fallacy is to do with basing a poem's value or basing a poem's judgment or judging a poem, an error in judging a poem according to the intention or according to the emotion of the reader. Okay, on the basis of the emotional effect the poem or the work has on the reader. It's an error in or supposed error of judgment on the basis of emotional effect upon the reader. See, when we try to judge a work based on the emotion of the reader, we tend to misinterpret the work, because basing it on the reader's emotion is not the ultimate value or indicator of the value of the work. It does not judge whether the work is good or bad. Like for instance, if I am to read a poem, I am depressed, I am very sad, I feel extremely sad, and I try to read a funny book so that it will help me forget my depressed state, and it might uplift my mood. But does it really so? No. Do you think I'll be able to enjoy that book? I don't think so. And what if somebody is to ask me, did you enjoy the book, that particular book that you read? Was it funny? Because that person had already read it and he or she may have felt it very funny, and may have asked me to read it so that it would make me happy or feel good, I would not have been in that emotional state to have appreciated the work, and therefore I would not have found anything funny, or I would not have found anything interesting about the book. The reason is because of my emotional state of mind. And therefore, if you are trying to base or judge the poem, basing it on the reader's intention, or not reader's intention, reader's emotional state, then it can lead to an error in judging that poem. So that is affective fallacy. Now turn to page number 41. Come to the last paragraph, and any given reader may or may not respond to what is actually provided by the text itself. Readers' feelings or opinions about a text may be produced by some personal association from past experience rather than by the text. The new critics coined the term affective fallacy to refer to the mistaken belief that the emotional effects upon the readers constitute the text's meaning. So, Wimsatt and Munro Beardsley, they defined affective fallacy in an essay in 1946, stating it as an error of evaluating a poem by its effects, especially its emotional effects upon the reader. Okay, so according to them, both the text is autotelic, it is self-contained. Nothing is required external to the text. So you don't have to go behind the author's intention, nor do you have to think about what effect it has produced on the reader, or the emotional effect on the reader, to judge if a work is good or bad, because the text is autotelic. You don't have to base the judgment of a particular work or a poem on the intention of the author, nor on the emotional effect it creates on the reader. Okay, so with that we have completed one concept given by two concepts, that is given by Wimsatt and Beardsley. So that they were intentional fallacy and affective fallacy. Okay, now let's move on to the next critic and his work. Before we move on, that one small paragraph there in your textbook 42, page number 42, it speaks about close reading. Close reading is all about the autotelic nature of the text. All you have to do is you have to read. You don't have to depend on the author's intention nor the reader's interpretation. All you have to do is look at the language that the text gives you. Look at the forms, the symbols, the metaphors, the rhyme, meter, point of view, setting, characterization, plot, and all those. That's all that you need. Those formal elements are all that you need to judge your work. You don't have to look at the intention of the author nor the reader's interpretation. This is close reading. Okay, and the new critics, they stressed on close reading. Now come to the next paragraph, that is heresy of paraphrase. Now what is heresy of paraphrase? Now paraphrasing, you know what paraphrasing is. And what is heresy? Heresy is again something that is not good, again an error. It is something that can lead to a mistake. It's not good. So another important critic is Cleantha Brooks. Cleanth Brooks, in his famous work Well-Wrought Urn, studies the structure of poetry. Or Well-Wrought Urn, the full title of the book is Well-Wrought Urn, Studies in the Structure of Poetry. There he studies the structure of poetry and what constitutes poetry. Thus, this title is taken from the metaphysical poet John Donne and his poem Canonization. Now, he has also written another important work, and that is Keats' Sylvian Historian. Again, the whole title is History Without Footness, and it's on Ode on a Grecian Urn. And the third book is Language of Paradox. Now, why I gave you all the three books is because all the concepts that we are going to deal, the concepts that we have, that he has given, is to deal with these books that he has written. So the first one is Paradox and Heresy of Paraphrase. So first we'll look into what paradox and irony is according to him, and then we will move on to the next topic, that is Heresy of Paraphrase. Now, paradox, this concept, now again, that is there in your textbook. First he starts with Heresy of Paraphrase, and then he comes to paradox. So first we will start with paradox and irony, and then we'll move to Heresy of Paraphrase. So it is in page number 42. If any of you are confused, turn to page number 42 of your textbook, the last two paragraphs. Okay, all right. So this concept, that is paradox and irony, is talked of in the language of paradox. The new critics value irony in a broader sense. It indicates a text's inclusion of varying perspectives on the same character and events. Brooks analyzed several poems from different historical backgrounds, from different historical eras. And he establishes that he establishes the crucial role of paradox. He says that paradox is the language of poetry, and it is inevitable to poetry. Poetry cannot exist without paradox. And he analyzes this, or he has come to this conclusion after analyzing and closely observing various texts, various poems from various historical backgrounds. So what is paradox? Paradox is when two opposite meanings are talked about. It is a statement that contradicts itself, but represents, at the same time, it represents the actual way things are. This working is portrayed, or he illustrates the working of paradox in two works. One is William Wordsworth's Lines Composed upon Westminster Bridge, where Brooks states that the writer is able to, that is Wordsworth, is able to appreciate the beauty of the industrialized London just as he appreciates nature. This is because, according to Wordsworth, London is a part of nature, and because it was man who built London, or the city, and man being a part of nature, London, something that he has made, turns into a part of nature, and therefore London is looked upon as a part of nature itself, because it was built by man, because man is a part of nature, and therefore the poet is able to appreciate the beauty of both man-made objects as well as nature. Clear? So there is a paradox. Nature is always beautiful. He brings together two contrasting ideas, two contrasts, right? So man-made objects were and the part of as a part of nature, and man-made objects are not a part of nature, you all know that, but he brings together these two concepts. So these contrasts are shown, vividly shown in the poem composed upon Westminster Bridge. Then lines composed upon Westminster Bridge by Wordsworth. Next poem that he speaks about is John Donne's Canonization, in which Cleanth Brooke says that there is paradox used as an underlined metaphor. This is because the speaker, that is Donne, is speaking of his physical love, his love making to his beloved. Okay, and he considers this love making, that is the physical relationship between a man and a woman, as saintly. Now saints do not indulge themselves in physical relationship. Donne presents the two lovers as appropriate candidates for canonization. So there is physical love and religion intertwined together. And it is complex, it is a complex conceit. So by the use of these two literary terms, Brooke tries to show that language of poetry is paradox. Poetry cannot exist without paradox. Any poem you look at it, Brooke states that there is paradox working. And it is inevitable to poetry. Poetry becomes beautiful because of the use of paradox. So what he basically focuses is on the words of the text, and thereby he finds the use of paradox working. Now there is also he had to face a criticism by the new Aristotelians. Now, who are new Aristotelians? New Aristotelians, will be speaking about new Aristotelians also. New Aristotelians were the ones who critiqued the new critics. They went against the new critics. That's a new idea that is going to come up very soon that we'll be discussing. Now, a very important critique of the new Aristotelians or neo-Aristotelians as they call themselves, R.S. Crane. He criticized Cleanth Brooke in his work Critical Monism of Cleanth Brooke, where he argues that Brooke focuses a lot on paradox. Hence, Brooke ignores other poetic figures and imagination. He also says that since Brooke focuses on the paradox in poetry, he is ignoring the power of paradox. He takes paradox very lightly. He is just too much obsessed with paradox that he does not understand, or he tries to observe it, or he tries to see it only in poetry. Paradox works in our day-to-day concept or day-to-day conversation also. Like for instance, if you look at the scientific formula, Einstein's formula, where E is equal to mc2, where matter is equal to, that is matter is equal to energy, matter and energy are the same. Is it not? This is a paradox when you are trying to equate energy and matter together. It happens not just in poetry but also in everyday language, right? So when you can also try to figure out or think about the paradox working in your language, when you in your day-to-day conversation. When you speak, you will find the contrast of two opposing ideas or two opposing ideas or thoughts working together when you speak in your day-to-day conversation also. Now, so that's with paradox and irony. Paradox and irony work together. You will find this paradox working in Gray's Elegy. Now, he quotes Gray's elegy to show how the questions are answers and vice versa. So there is a paradox. Questions becomes the answer itself. Like for instance, turn to page number 43. Can storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion call the fleeting breath? Now those are lines from elegy by Thomas Gray. Elegy written in the country churchyard. Now if you look at the first line here, can storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion call the fleeting breath? That's in the form of a question, but this question serves as an answer, so it's a paradox. Okay, it's a rhetorical question and the answer is implied, so it's a paradox, right? Now if you go further, if you look at the poem, so other poems as well, you will find the working of paradox according to Cleanthes Brooks. Now Cleanthes Brooks also states that see here in page 43, the form is that of a question, but the manner in which the question has been asked shows that it is no true question at all. The answer is already given. The answer is implied there itself. It's a rhetorical question. The next one that he speaks about is ambiguity. And ambiguity occurs when a word or an image or event generates two or more different meanings. Now one famous example of ambiguity would be good fences make good neighbors, right? So it has a lot of multiple meanings in it. We might agree to it, some may not agree to it. There's a different way of interpreting it as well. Now if you look at Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Act 3, Scene 1, you will find Mercutio bleeding to death, okay, and while bleeding to death, he says grimly, "Ask for me tomorrow and you shall find a grave man." So here you see that Shakespeare is playing a pun on the word grave. He uses pun and it has multiple meanings. When Mercutio is bleeding to death, he says, "Ask for me and you shall find me a grave man." The author is playing upon the word grave, which means very important, or more recently very serious. Okay, it is also used as a noun which stands for the synonym of tomb. So two ways in which he is trying to tell you, or two ways of interpreting it, that it has an ambiguous meaning, or it gives multiple meaning in it. One, you will find me a very serious person. Another, you will find me in the tomb. So he's playing with the word grave. Okay, so that's one thing of ambiguity. And now let's move on to heresy of paraphrase. Now, heresy of paraphrase. What is paraphrase? Paraphrase is, in simple terms, means summary. So heresy is an error. It is wrong. So whenever we try to summarize a poem, we are committing a big mistake. This concept is talked of by Cleanthes Brooks in his work Well Wrought On. In a chapter titled Heresy of Paraphrase, he speaks about its ill effects. It is injustice. Cleanthes Brooks speaks of the other new critics who began summarizing each and every word of the text. So this was like a critique to the new critics itself. Many of the new critics started to go upon, or they tried to summarize the work of the text. In doing so, what happens is the value of the text is lost. So here he is warning his co-critics against committing an error. He believes that an excellent poem or a novel cannot be condensed to 2 or 3 pages. Reading Paradise Lost, for example, is totally different from reading the summary of Paradise Lost. It is different. When you read the summary of Paradise Lost, you get to understand the plot. You get to understand the story. Okay, this is what Milton has intended by writing Paradise Lost. But you will never be able to paraphrase or summarize what the forms in the text, the beauty that it has or the impact it has on the reader when he reads the text cannot be summarized in a paraphrase, in a summary. So you don't get the artistic pleasure. You get it only when you read the poem or the text. So when you summarize a poem in his or her or in your words, we mustn't forget that what you summarize is your words. When you write a summary of a particular poem, you are not writing the exact words used by the poet or the writer, rather you are using your words. So the impact it has on you is totally different from the impact that you get upon reading the original text. So he is warning people from paraphrasing a poem. Okay, so it is an injustice to the poem or the work as such. So the words used by Wordsworth are going to create a greater impact than the words used by you or me in a summary. So according to Cleanth Brooks, form and content are inseparable from the poem. Whenever you summarize a poem or a work, you get only the content. You cannot get the form. Okay, you will not be able to summarize the form, the beauty and the way the poem is introduced or written by the poet. And therefore you are reducing the poem to what? To a prose, to nothing more than few words that were written by you in 2 or 3 pages. You are reducing a beautiful poem into prose. And it is not a scientific composition, right? It is not something to be written, or a poem is a poem and it cannot be changed into prose, or you cannot summarize it to prose. It is not a scientific composition. It is filled with emotion. And whenever you paraphrase it, the emotional effect or the dramatic effect that a poem has is lost. So therefore, Cleanth Brooks states that a poem consists of form and its content. So when you try to paraphrase a poem, you get only the content, the form is lost, the beauty is lost, the artistic pleasure is lost. Clear? And it does not have, it fails to bring any impact on the reader, and therefore he is warning his co-critics against paraphrase. Okay, so that is heresy of paraphrase, page 42, third paragraph. All right, okay, and next we move on to the next concept that we will be dealing with is tension. Tension is a concept by Alan Tate. Now, tension, a literary text becomes very complex with the use of tension, which when broadly defined means linking together of opposites. In its simplest form, tension is created by the integration of the abstract and the concrete of a general idea using specific images. This concept was brought forward by Alan Tate And according to him, if you come to page 43, last paragraph, okay, yeah, towards the last few lines of page 43. So according to him, there are two kinds of meanings. They are denotative meaning and connotative meaning. Denotative meaning is the surface meaning and connotative is the hidden meaning. Okay, denotative is used to create. So denotative refers to the dictionary meaning of a term. Connotation refers to the implied meaning. So denotative meaning, surface meaning, base meaning. Connotative meaning, the implied meaning or deeper or deep or hidden meaning. Now denotative is used to analyze the superficial meaning in poetry. That is the base meaning or the surface meaning in poetry. For example, Robert Fisher. Okay, Robert Fisher has written a beautiful poem called Seasons. Now, Season. So here he uses the denotative meaning and of, it's not there in your text. I was just giving you an example. You can check it out in Google. You can just Google search it. It was there in CBSE textbook, and I found the poem a brilliant poem, a beautiful poem, so explicitly written. He was a journalist turned author. So Robert Fisher, Season. So denotative meaning, it refers to changes in nature. If you look at the poem, the denotative meaning shows the changes that is happening in nature during various seasons. Okay, he starts with spring season and then comes to summer, autumn, and last winter. Okay, so he describes, there is nothing more about it than the description of various seasons. It is like when a small child, say a 6th standard or a 5th standard child reads the poem, he or she reads it as an observation of nature, the beautiful nature. But if we are to read the poem, we first, the denotative meaning or the superficial meaning or the base meaning is the observation or the close observation of nature that the poet has had. At the same time, when we can also move to the connotative meaning of the text, which means the connotative meaning is a hidden meaning, the symbols, and it can become very allegorical also. If you look at the poem that I told you about, the poem, if you look at the connotative meaning, or the hidden meaning or the implied meaning, it speaks about the cycle of life, our life, the symbols they have, and the metaphors that he has used to denote life. Spring stands for birth, autumn stands for the peak period or the youth, summer stands for the peak period or the youth, and autumn stands for the middle ages, and the winter stands for old age and death. And finally the poem ends with a hope for rebirth or hope for spring season. So it's the cycle, you can see the life cycle there. It looks very simple, it is only apparently simple, but you can, when you read the poem, you will be able to understand that there is something deeper or implied in that poem. So the base meaning or the denotative meaning would be all about the seasons, the poet's observation of the various seasons, the beautiful seasons, and how they are depicted. The connotative meaning is the implied meaning, where it stands for the life cycle. Okay, all right. So according to Alan Tate, only poetry, that is good poetry, which is able to communicate both connotative and denotative, can be considered, they can be considered good. Those poems which gives only denotative meaning are not good, or they are not great poems. They don't make great poems. The connotative, it is a combination of both denotative and connotative meaning. I hope you understood. So denotative means base, superficial meaning, and connotative means what? The implied meaning. Again, if you take Gulliver's Travels, when you read Gulliver's Travels, it is like a children's book. That's a denotative meaning, right? But when you look deeper, when you try to find out the hidden meaning of the text, you will find that it is a comment or a critique on the British, the government of the day as such. So there you understand the connotative and the denotative and connotative meaning. Okay, and likewise you have all the poems of Robert Frost. You have studied Birches. So again, Birches has got both denotative and connotative meaning. So apparently it looks simple. It is only apparently simple to a small child. He takes only the denotative meaning, but as you move on, you understand that it has a very connotative meaning as well. Okay. Now the next concept. Now I wanted to tell you what denotative and connotative mean. Only after that we can take the concept of tension. Tension in poetry. Now what is this tension in poetry? Now how can we judge a good poem from a bad one? What he does is he uses the two words intention and extension, and what he does is he cuts off the prefixes of the two words in and x. In and x are cut off, and what you get the same words, right? Tension. So this word tension is what makes a successful poem. A successful poem is always in a state of tension. Tension therefore is the life of a poem. Tension therefore is our life too, right? If we are very happy all the time, that is also not good, becomes very monotonous, right? And if you're sad all the time also, it becomes very monotonous. So it should have an equilibrium. Just kidding. Now here what he means is this concept. Tension is spoken of in his book, The Man of Letters in the Modern World. It is a combination of two words, extension and intention, and extension means denotative meaning. That's why I told you denotative and connotative meaning. Extension is what we call denotative meaning. That means superficial meaning, meaning, or the base meaning. Okay, and intention or intensive or intention, extension, intention, extension. Intention is the connotative meaning, the deeper or hidden meaning. Extension, denotative, base meaning. Intention, connotative, hidden meaning. Okay, so what does he do? He cuts off the prefixes of intention and extension. It comes to a state of tension. Tension is what makes good poetry. What does it mean? What does tension mean? Tension means a combination of denotative and connotative meaning, a combination of extension and intention together. Okay, now page 43 again. 43, and you have the second paragraph. Finally, the complexity of a literary text is created by tension, which broadly defined means the linking together of opposite. Okay, and read all that, the whole paragraph. So to get a good poem, a text must have tension, which means it must have both denotative and connotative meaning, or it must have the extensive or intensive meaning, extension or intention. So according to the new critics, the multiple meaning produced in the text by paradoxes, ironies, tensions, ambiguities must be resolved. Finally, it should be resolved. It should be harmonized by their shared contribution to the theme. So finally, when you read it, like for instance, I told you Robert Fisher's poem Seasons, when you read the poem, it's all these complex metaphors, the metaphors that he has used, the tensions that he has used, the ambiguity that he has used, the paradoxes and ironies he has used, it should be able to give me the meaning, or should be able to make me understand the theme. I'm not trying to tell you about the author's intention. I'm telling you about how the words conjure up images or produces an understanding of that poem in my mind. Clear? Close reading or detailed examination of complex relationship between the text, formal details and its theme is how the text's organic unity is established according to the new critics. So that's about it. We move on to the next important critics in our later videos, in the next class. So till then, thank you and keep safe.
Jamendo.com